Hey guys, we're back with the notes for 9.4. If you are watching this video, it means you are an in-person learner. You will be using an Nspire calculator to answer these questions, okay? If you would, pause the screen, copy what you see, and then we'll get started. Perfect. Okay, so when we are graphing with application questions, it's very important that you understand a couple things. You want to make sure you understand what the labels are so that we can put units on every kind of problem. So if we're thinking about a graph, your labels are going to be time on your x-axis. That most likely is going to be seconds or years or minutes. Your labels on the y-axis are going to be height, usually feet, meters, or inches, kind of depending on what you're using. We want to make sure, second of all, that we understand three main labels. Our y-intercept shows us where we started, what our starting height was. Our vertex shows us our highest point and what time we got there. And our zero tells us when we hit the ground or when we hit our level zero. So if you'll pause the screen on the bottom, label those three things. Perfect. We're going to go ahead and get started with the first problem then. All right, I am going to have you pause the screen again and copy a couple things down. First thing I want you to copy down is the menu trace graph trace. That's going to be how we find those critical points. Second thing I want you to copy down on the bottom is how we write domain and range. We're always going to go from 0 to another number, and I'll show you why we do that on a graph, but you do need to know that x is our domain and y is range. Okay? All right, let's go ahead and start. It says Jamie put her homework in a slingshot and launched it 20 meters per second from the top of a 60-meter tall school. Okay? From that information right away, I know that my height is in meters, and I know that my time is in seconds, so I'm going to label those. Okay. Coming back up to the top. Her nerdy friend Jack found the equation for the homework's height h in meters at time t seconds after launch is this equation. So we're going to go into our calculator. I'm going to push this scratch pad right here. Remember, if I hit it twice, I get a graph. Tab lets me type. And when you type this in, we do not want to use t's. We need to make sure everything is x's. So I would do negative 5x squared plus 20x plus 60. Okay. Now, when you press enter, you're not going to be able to see it because the shape of your graph is not going to be shaped like this graph. So let's talk about how we set our window. Okay. First of all, you're going to get the numbers for the window from the graph that's printed on your paper. You will not have to figure that out on your own. So if I'm going to ask you what x's do I want to see, well, I only want to see the x's from negative 3 all the way over to 9, and I want it to count by a scale of 1s. When I talk about what y values I want to see, I want to go from negative 10 all the way to 90, and I want to count by 10s. So I'm going to have you give me just a second to fill this in, and then I want to pause the screen and copy what you see. Perfect. Go ahead and pause, copy everything you see, and then let's talk about it. So to get to type that in the calculator, we're going to go menu, window, and then window settings. So menu, window, and then settings. I'm going to write that down. I would encourage you to write that down also. That way, if you forget, you can go back and look at it. But we're going to type in those exact same numbers. So I'm going to type negative 3, move my arrow down. Positive 9, move my arrow down. Type in a 1, down. I'm just typing in each number I know and using my arrow down to get to the next one. And then I can use my arrow to click OK, or I can just push enter. When I do that, it's going to graph it and make it look exactly like my paper looks. Okay? All right. In order to get the points on our graph, we're going to go to Control and T. So I'm going to write that again on the bottom of our paper. To get the table, we're going to use Control T. And again, you've seen me do this before in other sections. So we are going to graph. Now, I do need you to know that the first point we will always use is 0, comma, the number. So I'm going to hit the up arrow, and I'm going to start graphing these as we see them. 0, 60. Put a dot on 0, 60. I'm going to go down. Perfect. 175. You're just going to put it halfway between 70 and 80. 2 goes to 80. Moving down, 3 goes to 75. 4 goes to 60. And I'm just making dots everywhere I see these points. 5 goes to 35. And 6 goes to 0. Now, we are only going to go from the y-axis until it hits the x-axis. Those are the only points we want, and we are only going to connect using those points, okay? All right, so we are done with the calculator for right now. You can get out of the table, but don't delete it. Control-T. Perfect. All right, we want to make sure that we can find 3 specific points and label them. We want to know what the y-intercept is right here. We want to know what the maximum or the vertex is up here. And then we want to know what the x-intercept is. Now, the words that it will use are y-intercept, maximum, and 0. So that's what we're going to look for. And we're going to use the buttons that it talked about up at the top to find that. We're going to go Menu, Trace, and Graph Trace. It should usually start you with a little X somewhere that tells you where you are. If you move it, it will label the key points. I'm going to go back to the first one. My y-intercept is my first point. It's written right here, so I would label 0, 60. I'm going to move my arrow back up to the right so I can get to the highest point. It'll label it. My maximum is 2, 80. See how it labels it with the yellow box? Keep going all the way to the right. We want to know where it says 0. So 0 is at 6, 0. Okay. I'll give you a second to pause, write down anything you were missing so far, and then we'll get started. Perfect. Filling in the blanks. Our maximum height, remember, we're not talking about the time it takes right now. We're talking about how high did it get. So we want the y number. Our maximum height is going to be this value, 80, and our units are meters. How long did it take to get there? Well, that's an x number. Same point, how long did it take to get to 80 meters? That is going to be our 2, and our time units are seconds, so 2 seconds. When did it hit the ground? That's going to be this point down here on the bottom. It hit the ground on the 0 at 6, and my unit again for x's is 6 seconds. When it talks about why don't we include the other solution, look on the graph real quick on the calculator. So technically we know that there's another solution or 0 or x-intercept. Why do we not include this point over here? Well, that's because we would need to go back in time to get to a negative x value. So you can say something like you can't go back in time. You can say time can't be negative. You can say no negative seconds. I like to say time can't be negative. It's about the shortest way I can write that. Okay. All right. Last piece on most of these questions is going to be domain and range. The domain will always be 0 to where you landed, so that's this number. And the range will always be 0 up until your max height. So that's this number. So for me, it might be beneficial in your notes if you drew arrows and say like, all right, the 6 comes from right here and the 80 comes from up here. Okay. You could pause the screen right now, copy anything you missed, and then we'll move to the next page. I will not take as much time to explain everything else after this. Perfect. All right, going to the next problem. I went ahead and started with my domain and range already filled in. I'm going to go ahead before I even put it in my calculator, and I'm going to make sure I know what my x min and max are. So on my x-axis, I'm going from -1 to 7, counting by ones. On my y's, I'm going from -10 to 150, and I'm counting by tens again. Okay, that way when I'm ready for it, I already have it. Let's go ahead and look at our question. It says, Selena got mad and threw Justin upward at 64 feet per second from a stage 80 feet high. Her manager calculated the equation to be this. All right, so right now I got feet per second. So my height is in feet. My time is in seconds. All right, notice how I'm kind of labeling everything as I see it. Now I can move into my calculator. I'm going to hit delete, hold it down, yes. I want to delete everything. I'm going to type in my new equation. Remember, we have to use x's, so hit tab, We're going to go negative 16x squared plus 64x plus 80 and enter. Now, again, this window is set for my old problem, so to make it match my new problem, I am going to need to edit it. If you forgot how to do that, we're going to go Menu, Window, and then Settings. And we're just going to type out these numbers that we already had. I suggest you use your down arrow instead of the enter. So I would go -1, down, 7, down, 1, down, and again, every time I enter my number, what I want it to be, I just push down. And when I get to the very bottom, you can push down to get to OK, or you can just press enter. All right, now this looks like what I want. So we need the table to get the actual points. Control T gets me to the table, and we're ready to start graphing. The first point I always use is the 0. So go up. We're going to start on 0, 80. Oops, sorry. Going down, 1 goes to 128, so just a little bit under that 130. 2 goes to 144, so we're at a little bit between 140 and 150. Going back down to 128, back down to 80, and all the way down, 5 is at 0. Okay, can go ahead and connect those points, and I only go from the x-axis to the y-axis. All right, get out of the table, Control T again, and this time we want to label all our important points. So Menu, Trace, Graph Trace. Now, I know you might feel annoyed because we already know this is 5, 0. We already know this is 0, 80. And you might even already know that this is our maximum. But sometimes the maximum is not a whole number, and sometimes it will not give it to you in the table. I do not want you to ever accidentally think you have it and use it to answer the question. So this is the way to make sure you never mess that up. When you do graph trace, make sure that that number 2, 144 says maximum. Make sure that that point 0, 80 says y-intercept. Make sure that that point 5, 0 says the word 0. Okay, that's how we know we have everything correct. All right, perfect. Zooming out, we are ready to answer our questions. Remember that maximum height is a y value, so we would use our 144 with our units, feet. How long did it take him to hit the ground? That's this guy down here, so 5. And that is a unit of seconds. Says a cameraman snapped a picture at the top of the throw. What time did that happen? So time is my x's. So what time did I take the picture? That would be at 2 seconds. Okay. All right, it says if there had been another 80-foot tall stage closer to Selena, what time would he have landed on that? So remember, 80 feet tall is right here. If he had gone up off the stage at 80 feet and come back down and crashed kind of right here, what time would that have happened? Well, that lines up with 4, so 4 seconds. Okay. All right, I am going to remind you that your domain goes from 0 to wherever he landed, so make sure you're using the landing number at 5. And make sure that your range goes from 0 to wherever your maximum height was, and that was the 144. We do not need units on our domain and range, so if you would take a second, copy what you missed, and we're going to go to the next problem. Perfect. Moving on to number 3. Number 3, same idea. I'm going to start by filling in my domain and range, my x's and my y's. I'm going to start after that by filling in what I want my window to look like, so -1 to 9. Counting by ones, and then -10 to 80, counting by tens. Okay. Let's see if we can figure out what our units are measuring so that we can label our axes. It says the Kardashian family stood on top of their patio and threw their money up from the ground level at 40 m/s. Hopefully you know that m is meters and s is seconds, because that should be meters per second. That's how we would read that. Okay. All right. From there, we are ready to put it in our calculator. So let's go Menu. Whoops, sorry. We got to delete everything first. Delete, hold it down. Yes. We are going to type our equation in by using the tab. And let's put it in there. We got a -5. Make sure you do x squared, not t squared, plus 40x, and press enter. All right. We can kind of see the top of it, but we can't see where it lands. So we do need to change our window. Menu, window, settings. We're going to type in what we already wrote down on our paper. -1 down 9. Oops. There we go. And then -10 up to 80. You can keep it counting by tens. You can just press enter. You don't have to use your arrows for OK. All right, beautiful. We have our screen fit. We're ready to roll. We can now make our table. So Control T. Filling in our point. 0 is the first one I want. So 0, 0, since it started at ground level. 1 goes to 35. Let me zoom this in. 2 goes to 60. 3 goes to 75. 4 goes to 80. Let's go down just a little bit. There we go. 5 goes back to 75. 6 back to 60. 7 back to 35. And 8 all the way to 0. So we're going to connect from the x-axis all the way back to the x-axis. And mine's a little squirrely, but let me do that one more time. There we go. All right, again, you might believe you know all of your intercepts and your maximum, and you're probably right still. Everything we've done so far has whole numbers. But in case you want to make sure, we go menu trace, graph trace. We want to make sure when it says maximum that I know that point is 4, 80. If I go over here to 0, it's 8, 0. And if I go back all the way to the other side, my y-intercept, which it actually says 0 this time because it's both, is going to be 0, 0. Okay. Once we have everything labeled, we're ready to answer questions. So, since Kanye's broke, he was standing out on the 75-meter balcony trying to catch some. How long should he wait to reach out and grab it? All right, so if he's at 75, that's right here. How long should he wait to grab it? So when is the money going to be at 75? So he could grab it at 3 seconds, or he could grab it at 5 seconds. I would take either option, 3 or 5 seconds. Okay. Next question is supposed to be an H, so how long will it take for the rest of the money to hit the ground? That's a time question. That's talking about the 8, so 8 seconds. What is the maximum height for the money? Remember, height is my Y value. That's the 80. And my units are meters. You can put M or you can put meters. It works either way for me. Domain is from 0 to when it hit the ground, so that's this 8 number. Whoops, 8. And range is 0 to the maximum height, so that's the 80 number. Okay. All right, we have everything we need for this question, so if you'll pause it, copy down anything you missed. Let's go to number 4. All right, I'm going to hit delete, hold it down. Let's fill in a couple things on our label before we get started. So it says, Miss Black finally lost it when one more kid didn't turn in their homework. She took the kid's backpack, threw it out the window at 10 feet per second. All right, so I have my units. I'm going to go feet and seconds. I know what my window is going to be from -1 to 6, counting by ones. Y's are going to be from -5 to 60 this time, but only counting by 5s. So that's a little different than what we've seen before. Okay. All right, I'm going to scroll up and get my equation. Type it in using tabs. So make sure we're using x's. -5x squared plus 10x plus 50. Enter. Change our window using window. Settings. Beautiful. And I'm typing in, not everything has to change, only those -10s and the 9 had to change. So up to 60, counting by 5s. Good. All right, once I have that ready to go, we can make our table, Control T. And our first point is always 0, so we're ready to graph. 0, 50, 155, 250, 335, 410. Ooh, this one's different. So 410, I don't know where it hit 0, but at 5, it was way down underneath at -25. Okay, so this is the first time where you don't know down here where it hit the ground. We're going to definitely need to make sure that we get that point labeled, okay? All right, let's get out of our table, Control T. We're going to do our menu trace to label all our points so that we can answer our questions. All right, let's get this mystery point down here first. We're looking for the word 0. So my X number when I see 0 is 4.32, okay? Assume that this is 0. Because it said the word 0, assume that that's a 0, okay? All right, so 4.32 is a little less than halfway. Let's use our arrow back to make sure we have our maximum. Maximum is at 1 and 55. And our y-intercept, yep, 0.50. All right, we're ready to connect our dots and answer our questions. So first question says, Barry Allen, aka the Flash, was one of Miss Black's students and ran down the stairs to try to catch the backpack. He made it there in 5 seconds. Did he make it in time to catch the backpack? Why or why not? So we would say on this one, no, because if he got here at 5 seconds, it had already landed. It landed at 4.32 seconds. So no, landed at 4.32 seconds. It is important that you put the units on there, okay? All right, second question said, if there was a bird flying 60 feet above the ground outside Miss Black's window, would she have hit it? So let's say there's a bird right here. Would she have hit it with the backpack? You would say no. My graph did not cross there. It only got to 55 feet. Oops, feet. All right. Remember that domain goes from 0 to where it landed, so we can just copy that number, 4.32. Range goes from 0 to the highest it got, 0 to 55. Okay. If you missed anything on this problem, go ahead and pause it, copy it down. We're going to the very last one, guys. Good work so far. All right, down all the way to the bottom. I'm going to set up my pieces so far. So I'm labeling my domain 0 through the X's, 0 through the Y's. We're going to label our window. We're going from -1 to 4.5. Notice this one, guys. We are counting by 0.5s, okay? Y-min is still -5. Maximum is going up to 50, and I'm counting by 5 still, okay? All right. We are going to need to edit a couple things, so in order to make sure you know how to edit the table, will you pause the screen and copy this down? Perfect. All right, I'm going to delete everything that's in here. Hit tab so I'm ready to type, but we do still need 2 labels, so let's look for it. At the Olympics, Michael Phelps dives from a diving board that is 40 feet high. All right, so we're definitely using feet for my height. His position above the water is represented by the equation blah, where t is time in seconds. All right, so we're using seconds for our time. We're ready to type this in. Let's get our equation. So -16, make sure you use x, squared plus 24x plus 40. Beautiful. We kind of get the added benefit on this one that I can already see the whole graph, but it doesn't match my paper. So to make sure it matches my paper and I get all the numbers I need, we do want to edit it to make sure it looks like our window. So we're going to put these numbers in here, okay? All right, menu, window, settings. I like that we're going from that -1 to 4.5, counting by 0.5. You could just do 0.5, it's the same thing. We're still going to use the -5 and the 5, but I have to change that 60 to a 50. Press enter when you're ready, and it's very close to what it was, okay? All right, we need our table, and then we need our trace. So Control T to get the table. First point's going to be on 0, so 0.40. And then we have to change to make sure that I get all my half values. Okay, so this part down here, we got to control our table so that we can make our table step by 0.5s also. So let's go menu, table, table settings. I like the -1. You could type 0 though. Go down to 0.5 or just 0.5. You can leave the auto alone and just press enter. Okay, that's going to give me a few more points on the table to help me out here. All right, so we're going to go 0.5 takes me to 48. 1 takes me to 48. 1.5 takes me to 40 again. Scroll down just a little bit. 2 takes me to 24. And 2.5 takes me to 0. So this time I already know the 0. Control T. What I don't know is what that highest point is. This is why we need our menu trace. So menu, trace, our graph, okay? Let's make sure we got our 0 first. So 2.5, comma 0. And then this time we need our maximum. So looking for that button that says maximum. Perfect. I'll label him on here. So 0.75, comma 49. All the way back to get my y-intercept, and we've got 0.40. We did already know him. Okay. All right, so even though you can't see it, that maximum point is actually right here. He's right halfway between 0.5 and 1. So I want to make sure that my graph goes up and hits that 0.7549, okay? All right, we're ready to answer our questions. Maximum height for Michael is going to be that 49 number right here. Our units are feet, so 49 feet. How long after the jump did they reach that height? That's the time part, so that's my X part, 0.75 seconds. All right, what time did he hit the ground, or in this case, hit the water? That's going to be my 0 down here, 2.5 seconds. And then remember, domain is when you hit the ground, so it's not the 75 number. It's the 2.5 number, and I'm going to zoom just a little bit so I can fit that. So 0 to 2.5 is my x's. My range is until the maximum height. So from 0 all the way up to 49. Okay. All right, if you missed anything on this page, you could pause it, copy it down. Guys, we are done with the notes for 9.4. If you would please go ahead and get started on the assignment. If not, we will work on it in class.